Now, once the vCentre server deployment wizard has completed, you'll be left with a screen like this. Now, we can click on continue here and it's going to carry on with stage 2 of the deployment process. You'll notice here there is a URL as well to go directly to the vCentre server management interface to continue setup that way. That's worth bearing in mind. If you have a situation where, for example, you've left the installer running and your computer is rebooted for updates or whatever, you can still go to the vCentre's IP address on that port 5480 and carry on with the wizard from there. Just click continue in here. We get this screen here. So time synchronization, synchronize the time with the ESX host. You can alternatively sync with NTP servers. What I'd suggest doing is configure NTP on your vSphere hosts and then synchronize your VMs with the hosts. Although from a VMware perspective, they don't really mind which way around you do it as long as you do one of them. I'm going to leave SSH access disabled. It says here, for vCentre server high availability, enable SSH access. This is not to be confused with vSphere high availability. vCentre server high availability is about keeping the vCentre appliance highly available. vSphere high availability is about keeping your other virtual machines highly available. So although we are going to be using vSphere high availability in our cluster, we are not using vCentre server high availability, so we do not need to enable SSH access. SSO configuration. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we provided a root password for the configuration of the vCentre server appliance. That's just the root login for the Linux operating system on which the vCentre server appliance is built. The vCentre application, however, also has its own authentication engine, which centers around the vSphere single sign-on setup. That single sign-on setup can be used across multiple vSphere products, including vCloud, Horizon View, and a few others. It can also be used for multiple vCentre servers. Let's say you've got a vCentre server in your data center in London and a vCentre server in your data center in Manchester. You can use the same single sign-on domain to manage both vCentre servers. So we're going to create the single sign-on domain name. I'm going to use vcentre.lab.local and set a password, and you'll note the default username is administrator, so we'll need to remember that for later on. We can also there, of course, join an existing SSO domain if we have one elsewhere. And you can join the customer experience improvement program if you wish. That is entirely up to you. And we click finish and OK. So again, this process is going to take a little time to complete, so we'll leave that to run through, and when it's completed we will add our hosts into vCentre and configure a highly available cluster. And that's the wizard completed. We get a link here to take us directly to vCentre. Again, vCentre is protected with a self-signed certificate by default. And we have here the login for vSphere. So we're going to log into the vCentre server here with the credentials that we created during that wizard for the single sign-on domain. You've also got this enhanced authentication plugin here, which can allow you to do Windows session authentication, so you can automatically log in with your Active Directory credentials. However, at this point, we have not joined vCentre to any Active Directory domain, so that wouldn't be possible. And this is what vCentre looks like. Now, yours will be a little more, there'll be a little bit more space to play with. I've increased the font size of my screen to make the video easier to see. We get a couple of messages here. So again, there are expired or expiring licenses in your inventory. That's because vCentre has gone in an evaluation mode. By default, we haven't got a vCentre license, so we'll dismiss that. We've got a message there about a plugin that's automatically been deployed. We're not going to worry about that yet. We're not looking at VMware Lifecycle Manager, so I'm just going to dismiss that. And we have a couple of alarms here, which I think have just been generated whilst the appliance was under load trying to initialize. So the first thing we're going to want to do is add our hosts to this. So we've just got an empty vCentre server. Yes, it's running on our ESX host at the moment, but vCentre knows nothing about that host at the application level. So the first thing we need to do is create a data center. Now, a data center is just a logical grouping of hosts and clusters. Doesn't necessarily need to define machines that exist in a single data center. You could create one super data center in there, which encapsulates all of your hosts. Typically, you'll probably do it per facility, but you don't have to. It is just a logical grouping. That's all it is. So I'm just going to stick with the default there of data center because why not? When we right click that, we can say add host. So we'll pop in the details of our first host. Get the certificate warning again. Obviously, we've seen that a lot so far. Little summary about the host, what version it's on, etc., what virtual machines are running on it. And then we can assign a license. Now, again, at the moment, these are only evaluation licenses in here. I mentioned previously that vCentre has facilities to manage these licenses. Essentially, you can put your vSphere license key into vCentre once, and then as you add your hosts, you just say apply license. You don't end up having to type the license key in 20, 30, 40 times for however many hosts you have. So we'll leave that on evaluation license for the purposes of this lab. Lockdown mode. Now, vCentre allows you to manage your hosts. And when you're managing your hosts through vCentre, best practice is don't connect directly to your hosts anymore. Because any changes that you make directly on your hosts could actually get overwritten by vCentre. Lockdown mode allows you to configure your hosts so that they cannot be logged into directly. Now, normal mode means you can't log into the host through the web console, through its own web interface, but you can still get into it through the direct console user interface. So you can plug a keyboard and keyboard and monitor into the host, and you'll be able to manage it that way. Strict disables the direct console UI service also, so you can't connect a screen, keyboard and mouse directly to the host. We're going to leave this on disabled for this, but we'll take another look at that later on. VM location, which data center are we putting in? Well, we've only got one, so we're going to say next and finish. And if we look at our tasks down here, we'll see that is running through. We'll just give that a few moments. And there we go. So we've got our host there, and if we expand that out, we can see the virtual machine that is running on it. Now we'll just take a closer look at the options here in vCentre's interface now that we have something in there. So first tab is hosts and clusters. So you can see the host and the clusters that are in there, and by default you can also see the virtual machines in there. Then you have the virtual machines tab, which just shows the virtual machines running within your estate. It doesn't show any of the hosts. However, if you click on the virtual machine, you can see which host it is on there and jump to it from there. Data stores shows us the data stores that it's detected on each host. If we look at the network, so we can see that VM network that we had defined on the host.